Okay, greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pan-African Community News Network. Hopefully we are live. You should be able to hear me on Facebook and YouTube. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander, and we're going to go over the news from the last 2 weeks from a Pan-African perspective. Sister Oleander, you want to say hi? I don't know, just mic check to see that we can hear you.
Yes, greetings everybody, greetings. Hope everybody's well.
Excellent. And as usual, if you could please just use the comments to let us know that you can hear us and see us okay, that would be really, really useful, just as a mic check to make sure there's no technical issues. But what I'm going to do while we're waiting for that, Sister Oleander will be minding the chat for that. I'm going to move ahead with the news, as I always do, and start with We Remember and Our Libations. And so the first story, the first libation, I should say, is it's a couple of weeks late actually, and this is just a we remember of our young brother Colin Roach, who passed away on the 12th of January 1983. He was 21 years of age when he lost his life. He was concerned that there was someone after him. He went into a police station, Stonington Police Station, for safety to see if he could get some help. And then not too long afterwards, someone placed a sort of shotgun in his mouth and murdered him. Now, the police say that he did it himself. I don't know if you understand how, think about a sort of shotgun. We're talking about a rifle this long, so you'd have to do this impossible act of gymnastics to kind of like pull the trigger. But that's what happened. It took a long time of community protests, community action for anyone to even take the case seriously. It's still really unresolved. Well, I say unresolved from a formal point of view. One of the amazing things that happened, from a community perspective, is that there was a people's inquiry that investigated the situation. I don't have the book with me here, unfortunately, right now, but the people put together an inquiry, investigated all the key suspects, and came to, drawing conclusions from the evidence that they could source. It's still a horrific case. We think about deaths in custody. We think about the lack of police scrutiny. And today, as we go through some of the news, we're going to see why that's really, really important, why we need to really start returning back to days when we do our own investigations and we compel those who are involved in harming our community to testify amongst us. Even those who are supposed to safeguard us, they testify amongst us, so we can do grassroots scrutiny from a perspective that is not trying to protect the status quo. I just want to remember Colin Roach. One of our researchers, Brother Colin, answered a really good question. And wonders what happened to young people who attended those protests 40 years ago. So if you think this happened in 1983, we're 40 years on. Where are all those protesters? I know some of them are activists and some of those are still engaged in community work, but we still have a lot of work to do, unfortunately. The next story I'm going to go to, I said the next libation, I'm going to try and keep succinct or else I'll get really angry. And I'm pretty sure by now most of you have heard about the murder of Tyree Nichols. He's a young man, age of 29. He was pulled over by a gang of police officers in America, in Michigan. They claim that he was engaged in reckless driving. There's now been some footage released which shows that that wasn't the case, so we still don't know why they pulled him over. And then on the 7th, well, it's not the 7th of January is when he passed away, so it would be the 4th of January when this stop took place. 5 police officers of all of African heritage, beaten to a pulp. They left him crying for his mother. They left him running for his life, and they tracked him down. I say 5 police officers. Actually, I should correct that. There were 6 police officers involved in this. There was the 5 police officers who are Africans who hunted him down. But he was tasered, if I'm correctly, by a European officer who we're not seeing reported in the news. His father's actually asking, Tyrese's father, is asking, why aren't we hearing about charges against the 6th officer? Tyree passed away on the 7th of January, 3 days later, after the horrendous beating. If you see the footage of him in hospital, you can see, you can see the damage they did. They dragged him out of the car, threw him on the ground. They had their guns drawn. He didn't know what was going on. He was telling them, I haven't done nothing. Why are you doing this for? He complied completely. He was this young 29-year-old. He was a skateboarder. There's no reason on earth that will justify this. I mean, I haven't seen the footage, which is quite strange. I normally tend to watch the footage of these things because I often have to defend our community from attacks from the media, and I kind of need to know the evidence. What's quite interesting in this particular case is that the 5 officers, 5 not 6, but 5 of the officers have been fired from the police. They're facing murder charges, and there's no one. I'm not hearing any footage from anyone saying, why did he run? You know, he must have been doing something bad. This is probably a record when we talk about turnaround time for officers to be fired and taken off and charged with murder. Normally, when the police officers are engaged in these kind of assaults, it takes ages. It takes, lengthy fighting, proving that their actions were wrong. I think most of us who watch this program know that the situation is because it's different because those officers are African. And so there are some white supremacists who are thinking, phew, we caught one there. We escaped one. But that's not the situation here. We'll probably return to this in the weeks to come. But some people are not recognizing the fact that just because the officers, or 5 of the officers involved, were African, doesn't mean that this is not an issue of racism. Those 5 officers were serving as deputies of white supremacy. They were trained by a police institution how to be brutal, how to use violence against unarmed African bodies. And they were also taught culturally that they would normally get away with such horrendous acts of violence with impunity. But something went wrong this time. I don't think it's the first time these officers have done that. I think there was a camera, if I've read correctly, on a lamppost that also caught what happened. So the officers were wearing body-worn cameras. I don't know how much information was caught by that, but it's also apparently this lamppost that also caught the footage. So that's the story, and we remember Tyree Nichols. It has affected me all weekend, and I'm sure it's affected many of us. I would suggest, actually, and this is something I don't, but I would suggest don't watch the video unless you have to, unless you have to be in a situation where you have to, defend and advocate for us on these kind of issues, because this happens in the police. Everyone seems to be forgetting. Happens in the UK, I should say. A lot of people seem to be forgetting what happened with Deji Omashaw. That's the young brother who was tasered on, was it Chelsea Bridge? And basically tasered until he lost his life by jumping into the River Thames. So no one can tell me this doesn't happen in the UK. No one can say this is an American-only issue. This is something that's live. This is something that's real. This is something we've got to deal with. And if we go back to all the time when we open up with Colin Roach and to now, 40 years later, what's changed? We have officers in so-called blackface deputizing for white supremacy. I'm going to leave that there. I don't know if anyone's got anything to comment. What you can chat online. We should be hopefully on Facebook and YouTube. Let us know that you can hear us okay, that you can see us okay. But I'm going to move on to the next part of this program, where we look at some of the news, UK politics, based on a Pan-African perspective across the UK. So the next story, today's Sunday, and some of you would have known that the chairman of the Conservative Party has been fired for a breach of parliamentary, what was it? A breach of the ministerial code. You know, we can have a whole program on how long it takes for these corrupt politicians to be held to account, and they only fall on their sword. They only get rid of, you know, their mates who are drinking from the trough of the public purse if they think it's going to damage their credibility for the next election, or else they'll just keep them. But this is not about Zadim. This one's about Suella Braverman. As you can see from the headline, Wendy Williams, and she's the chair of the Windrush Inquiry, has actually stated that she's really disappointed with the fact that the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has decided that she's not going to implement the Windrush recommendations as promised by the previous incarnation of this regime. And you know, I find it really difficult to actually say this, but I didn't think anyone could be crueler in the Tory party when it comes to being a Home Secretary than Priti Patel. But Suella Braverman's doing a really great job. She is proving that when you think that the government has sunk to its lowest, there are still depths that they are willing and capable and actively relishing going to. So there were several recommendations, but the ones that stand out that they've actually decided to renege on is what was it? There was the Migrant Commissioner. So this was just somebody who would stand up for people who had migrated here and represent our concerns at the highest level of politics. They've Priti Patel, who said that they were going to implement all the policies, has, you know, that's what the government said. Now we have this regime saying that they will not be implementing those policies. There was also this. I mean, they call it reconciliation. It's like this truth and reconciliation nonsense. I say nonsense. I shouldn't say that, but it was just an opportunity for the victims of Windrush, the families, to actually come face to face with the ministers, the officers, the civil servants who had created the policies that had actually caused so much harm and led to the deaths of so many innocent people from our community. And as much as I don't like the politics of these truth and reconciliation type things, the process of actually coming face to face with those who enact these inhumane policies is actually a part of restorative justice that I do believe in. So these reconciliation events with Windrush families was a very important recommendation. It was a quick win for them. All they needed to do was just be honest, turn up, create a forum and listen, and then hopefully learn, so that families could start to heal and believe that change was coming. But I think, as our brother Patrick Vernon said, he gave an amazing presentation on Channel 4 News this week. He said that they're backsliding. You know, they're just taking the mick. It's disgusting. They're essentially victim blaming. Anyway, so I just thought that's the UK politics news. There are others, but I want to keep this quite brief. So we're going to go to the next section of the program. Just to remind you, you are watching the Pan-African Community News Network. It's Sunday, the 29th of January, 2023. And now I'm going to go into some of the UK policing matters. And the next story is one that won't come as any surprise to many of you, is a report which reveals that many of African staff and officers inside the Metropolitan Police, and this is a report dealing specifically with the Metropolitan Police, have felt abused and have left the service after feeling, made to feel suicidal. I think I talk about the police almost in every single program, and it's something that I'd rather not do, but unfortunately they keep bringing more and more and more issues. And in fact, it's probably going to get worse, because I think the Met Commissioner made this statement that every week for the next several months, there's going to be at least, not every week, I think every day, there might be 2 prosecutions of corrupt police officers. And while I have issues with the focus that the Met is taking now on this purge, because what they're doing now is they're focusing on gendered violence, which is rightly so, abuse of women and officers who engage in domestic violence and using their badge, using their status of police officers to avoid prosecution. That it's only right that they're being targeted. But what I'm not hearing come out of the mouth of any of these police officers is that they're also looking at racism. They're looking at Afrophobia, they're looking at structural violence. That's not happening. And so it kind of reminds me, and it makes me draw the conclusion that this is a PR stunt. And so even though there might be some officers, some senior officers who are serious about change, who want to see the force change. And I don't know, I haven't met the commissioner yet. I don't know, I haven't got I haven't got a sense of how he rolls. I had to meet someone and talk with them, to get an idea of that. The actions I'm seeing are constructive, but I don't think they're taking race. When I say race, I'm talking about racism and Afrophobia seriously. In fact, I think they could just brush it under the carpet, and as long as they focus on 50% of the UK population, i.e. women, that they'll get a clean slate and they can go back to business as usual. But let me talk about this particular story. In this particular case, we have 2 serving Metropolitan Police officers who are actually revealing that there's a culture of racism and sexual abuse in the force now. And it's that present now, not that these are serving officers, not those who have retired, that is who are seeing suicidal thoughts amongst colleagues. I mean, they've spoken anonymously because they don't have trust in this anti-corruption drive at the police. And they also allege that an officer was raped by another staff member, but her claim was dismissed. So when we think about how, and this is where Kimberly Crimshaw's, and I'm sorry if I start getting nerdy, but her theory on intersectionality, or I could say, it goes way beyond that, to anti-woman speech. We can't just deal with gendered violence in a nation that is intrinsically racist like the UK without talking about racialized violence. And so, I just thought I'd share that story. There's more stuff. There are officers who spoke on ITV News, and they said that the morale of African officers in the Met was at an all-time low, because basically the police had just been broken all the promises that they made since the murder of George Floyd. And we knew this would happen. We knew a lot of people would put out flags talking about what they're getting. What's that? The blue squares. They would put out these massive statements about how they're going to reform and make things better. But once the spotlight's off, it's back to business as usual. I want to move on for that, because unfortunately the next story is again related. This is the policing section. And so this story is not about Bianca Williams, who you might remember in 2020 was stopped by her with her partner while driving in West London, and she had a child, and they'd done nothing wrong and was searched. And I think it was only because, was it Linford Christie and Dawn Butler? There's a few people who intervened that actually we got a proper investigation. And I think some kind of like high profile apology. I don't know if it's an apology or just acknowledgement that this is going to be looked at. Well, what's happened now that that's fallen out of the hotline? Well, if we look behind the curtain, And if you think about the Wizard of Oz, so all this bureaucratic speak about diversity and doing the right thing, and making sure that everyone is confident with the police to deal with accusations of racism. An IOPC inquiry was started. An investigator was assigned to it, and her name was Tricia Napier. She investigated. She provided a report on her investigation to the head of the IOPC, and they watered it down. They just made it into some tepid, I suppose, some kind of misunderstanding. Now the IOPC, of course, denies this. They're saying that Tricia Napier is kind of like she's wrong, that they investigated her complaint because she complained, right? So our sister Tricia, she complained. She said, like, I've given them a report, I've done my independent investigation. That's what I'm here for. You need to take action. And they looked at what she did, and they said, well, we've looked at it. We don't think it merits anything more serious than a slap to wrist. And so Tricia just said, what the hell am I doing here? She resigned. She resigned from the IOPC. This is someone who worked for IOPC, someone who wanted to do the right thing. But you know that saying, you've got to be in it to win it? Well, she went inside the belly of the beast trying to help. She did what she was paid to do. She provided did an inquiry, returned the results, and she had to leave because they dismissed it. What we had in this particular instance, and I saw a newspaper article on this and some comments from the IOPC. The IOPC made some kind of ridiculous statement that they investigated her complaints. They looked at the merits of it, and they don't believe that they were watering down the issues. So, and I'm saying they don't believe that they were, because that's exactly what it was. The same way the police mark their own homework, the IOPC marks their own homework. And so she's resigned, like I said. And what I find quite interesting is that now the same head, I think his name was Michael Lockwood, has mysteriously resigned from the IOPC because of some legacy complaint. And we have no transparency about what that complaint is. I have no idea what that is, but he just resigned. And so I don't even know who's running the IOPC. The IOPC is just not fit for purpose. But it's, this is the story we want to share. And it's the reason why I like to make the case, and make the case quite firmly, that until we establish our own truly independent scrutiny panels, and I'm not just talking about policing, I'm not just talking about a child safeguarding, I'm talking about education, I'm talking about healthcare. We need independent scrutiny panels that are headed up with community members, with stakeholders. And that means, so if it's schools, it's parents and children. If it's hospitals, it's patients, and doctors. We need to set these up. And I hate sounding like a scratch record. We have the skill set. We have the will. We know what's there. I can't do the work now. But I'm more than happy to advise and help anyone who wants to set up a panel in their industry to independently scrutinize, the main bodies in their field. This is what I did with Legali, and successfully so. I'll move on from there. This one is essentially, I don't know if you know, the police every now and then issue these statements showing how successful they have been seizing knives off the streets, and they try to use it to validate the reasons why they do stop and search, because sometimes they find them on young people, sometimes they find them in bushes or in parks. But there's now conflicting research about this approach. You see, because what the police do, they find these knives and they put them on Twitter and social media and distribute them to prove that what they're doing is of merit. But what the research is saying now, well, in fact, let me be clear, there's two pieces of research. So if you listen to London's Violence Reduction Unit, this is Khan's VRU, and they're saying that, well, actually, posting these images have very little effect on young people. And that's their position. And you would think that they are the scrutiny body, the unaccountable scrutiny body, as far as I'm concerned. For the police, they've been ineffective for decades, and they fund it. But there's independent research from the University of Strathclyde, and they're actually saying, well, no, actually, young people actually feel more fearful and unsure about where they live when they see these images. What happens is that seeing this makes them think that not only are they, well, they say that, you know, I'm going to say not only are they under siege by the police, but they also feel unsafe that there are people carrying knives around. So, you know, it's a mixed bag there. I think the truth is somewhere in between. I mean, the researchers also said that the practice could actually encourage knife carrying. And I know I'm not a young man now, but when I was a young man, I remember that thought process of knowing that, you know, if there are young people around carrying knives and things are getting as dangerous as the media keeps telling me, then I might need to carry a knife to protect myself. And I was fortunate that my father was firm with me to talk me out of those kind of silly ideas. But not everyone has that kind of like influence in their life. So, you know, I thought I'd share this report, and I've been completely transparent on that. There are two approaches to, does it work or does it cause harm? Okay, 29th of January, Pan-African Community News Network, and me, your host, Toyin Agbetu, Sister Oleander, just going through the news from the last couple of weeks. And hopefully you can hear us live. Hopefully, you know, if you want to make a comment, then please feel free to send something in the chat. I can't see Sister Oleander on the studio, so I'm hoping that I'm not just here by myself talking to myself, which is possible. I'm going to assume that she's going to join soon and that we are still live. Now, I'm going to go through UK sport, and most of you who know me know that I'm not a sport head, but these stories are related to sports, and there is a Pan-African angle to talk about on them. In fact, the next story, which is this one involving Johnyams, we have a bizarre scenario where the FA, as regulatory or disciplinary commission, has said quite firmly that Mr. Yems is not consciously a racist, while the FA is actually saying, well, we disagree with that finding. So let me give you a bit of context, because this is often what happens in the workplace with many African people. So Johnyams was banned from football until next year, June, after he was found guilty of racist abuse towards his players. Now, he admitted one charge, and I've got to be clear about it. He admitted one charge, and he was found guilty of 11 other incidents of racist abuse towards his players. But the FA Disciplinary Commission, this is supposedly an independent regulatory body, said that they accepted the argument that he is not a conscious racist. And Yems himself goes in further. He says, not only am I not a racist, I'm owed an apology. Now, being clear, he admitted one charge and he was found guilty of 11. So what's going on? So the FA, you know, as the Football Association says, well, look, we completely disagree with the view of the panel. He was racist, and there's no place for this kind of behavior inside the sport. What was he saying? He was calling Muslims players terrorists. He was messing around with the name of Arnold Schwarzenegger and making the latter, his surname, come across using the N-word when he was talking to African players. He was just an abusive bully. And this excuse that, you know, he's of an older generation, that's what the disciplinary commission was alleging, that, you know, he didn't do it consciously. It's just an old style. He's 63 years. He's just talking this way. No, he knows these things are unacceptable. He's abusing his power. And this is, we saw this kind of excuse happen in Buckingham Palace with the situation with Sister Ngozi and Hussey. You know, this defense that, oh, you've got to give the old people a bly. They're just, you know, they're just using language from a different era. They don't know that using the N-word is racist. Well, they do know. They do know that it's offensive to call someone who's Muslim a terrorist. They do know. And so I don't get how the FA can have a disciplinary commission that can draw this conclusion that he's not a conscious racist. when he's conscious of what he's saying, because he knows who he's targeting at. And I don't understand how the FA, who are the parent group, can't just fire the disciplinary commission and set up a new one. And this is why I said, I talked about scrutiny panels. That's why we need one in football. We need to do it ourselves. So that's that story. Let me move on to another story, which is, this is a man who's been handed a 3-year banning order after he racially abused the Chelsea and England player, Raheem Sterling, during a game. Now, I could probably do one of these stories every single edition that we put out, and I'm not going to, but just so a reminder, this is not going away. It doesn't just happen at the top, but the reason why it's important to share these two stories together is to see how behavior at the top is transmitted down to the audiences in the cloud. So this guy called Timothy Hislop was heard to shout out the racist slur when Sterling was on the ball in October last year. Now, he's 54, he's younger than me. He was brought in after the game, he was interviewed under caution. And the good thing is that he too pled guilty, and this is really important. And he was charged with a racially aggravated Section 5 public order offence. But like I said, we need to remember that this behaviour is learned. This is in football, this is in policing, this is in education, this is in all sectors of British life. The one story that I forgot to add to here was it was the United Nations working group. There was a United Nations working group that kind of like went around the UK meeting community organisations, members who are on the grassroots members, and who are doing some amazing work, who reported back on. Let me move this slide. They reported back on. That's the wrong one. They reported back on the findings of all these discussions across the UK. And what they found out was, it's basically what we've been talking about every 2 weeks, is that structural racism and Afrophobia is embedded in UK life. Now, I haven't got a slide for this, and I apologise for that. But what the government did was send a response saying that actually we completely disagree with the United Nations report. And again, it did that thing where it lent into that stupid Creed report, saying that it was an exemplar, that the United Nations officers were viewing African people as a homogenous group, and that it had no bearing with reality. Now, you've got to remember here that this is a united working group that had actually travelled the UK talking to communities that are on the ground. And yet the response has come from a government that sits in its lofty towers in Westminster, which is full of people like the Suella Bravermans, the Kemi Badenochs, the Kwasi Kwartengs, the Zawadi. I can go on. They go on and on and on, who are so disconnected from our everyday life. And they have the nerve to use that sewage report to actually try and claim that what the United Nations reported back after having spoken with us direct, like face to face, was actually a fiction. Like I said, I haven't got a slide for that one, but it's just in my head. I'll try and do it for the next program, but it's worthy of remembering that. Okay, so let me go on to the next section, which is where we just go over some general news. And the first story I want to talk about, just as a reminder of how resistant the UK is to our presence in the UK, or us having any kind of recognition of our contribution to the UK, is this story about racist vandaling, the La Rose Lane sign that has been erected in Haringey. Now, we've been talking about this and other issues related to this for many months now, and many of you will be aware of how angry I'm at Hackney for starting on this in an amazing way and then slowly backpedaling. But not all boroughs have actually decided to take that approach, and what's happened in Haringey, they went full steam ahead and they changed the name of a road. And now, let me give you a little bit of background to all of this. When a local authorities have certain powers which they can, I don't want to say force through changes, but they can make changes without significant pushback. And so if they own, for example, a council estate, they can change the name of the council estate. They would normally, it's good practice to ask everybody in the council estate if they're going to change the name. But say it was called a Hitler estate or, I don't know, Leopold estate. They could change the name of the estate without actually any consultation, because they can say, look, these terms are toxic terms. They're offending the people. We know that there's not the values of the borough. We're going to change it. They can also change road names. But changing a road name is a bit more complicated, because they have to, first of all, make sure they get permission from all the emergency services. They need to know that the new name will not be something that makes it hard for the police, ambulance, and the fire services to find them in a crisis. So they have to do, there's quite a few hurdles they have to go through. And in good practice is that they also, survey residents. And depending on what residents say, they can make a judgment call on that. So sometimes residents, and often, vote in favour. And that's what happened with Hackney with Castle Gardens. But residents vote in favour, take down the name of Castle Garden. And we're more than happy to have the name of a local African woman replace the name of the garden. That's how we got Kit Crawley Gardens up there. And that was amazing. But roads themselves, like this one, which was formerly Black Boy Lane, are a slightly different issue. The council can change them if they go through that same process, but it's expensive. And I have to state that, because what tends to happen is that if you change the name of a road, all the documents of the people who live on that road or who have business on that road have to also change. And some of them might ask for compensation from the council. And so councils have to do this really difficult balancing act of saying, what's the value in doing this? This is going to cost us money, but is it the right thing to do? And do we just take that hit? And so in this case, Haringey said yes. And there was an estimate that it was around £186,000. That was the cost to change the name from Black Boy Lane to La Rose Lane. But they went ahead anyway. So that's just to give you the context. So they had this amazing launch. It was lovely. I wasn't able to attend, but I saw all the reports and video footage on national news media. Within 48 hours of the sign being changed, you had the racists coming out in force, not just vandalizing the sign, which is what they did, and you can see in the image above. They also started being mischievous and placing the name Black Boy Lane on their private property, where the council has no powers to compel people to remove it. It's the same thing, or it'd be similar as like putting a sign outside your window using the N-word. That would have a bit more weight for a council to say that you're creating some kind of offence into the public realm. But, if someone says that I vote for Trump, there's nothing you can do about that. Or if someone says that Trump is an amazing person or Boris is not a racist, there's nothing you can do about that. So people are doing that. I thought I'd just give you that. I don't know if I need to go over the legacy of John La Rose. I think I spoke about it in the last program. I know some people are a bit baffled about how come the road name has been changed to La Rose Lane, and yet it still says on the sign formerly Black Boy Lane. Are you still putting that toxicity back into the world? Well, this is a transition phase, just for those of you who are answering that question. So essentially what happened is that the council will keep that name there for a year. I suppose it'll be around a year, and then they'll stop using it completely. And this is just, like I said, it just eases the transition. But what we're seeing by residents is this pushback against having the name of an amazing activist, amazing human being, decent human being, being venerated, just being recognized in the borough that he worked. And I think that's actually outrageous and disgusting. People can argue it's about reclaiming the name Black Boy Lane, but actually, no, it's not. It's about preventing public spaces honoring and reflecting the names of people of African heritage. So that's that story, and I'm going to leave it there. But just in case you decide, because I can't keep continuing on all this work, just in case you want to get engaged and need to understand how it works, that's how it works behind the scenes. I did my PhD on bits and stuff like that. They always had to make a call between money and ethics, and the most principled will say, you know what, we'll explain to the public why we're doing it. We'll ask them, but we'll explain that this is what we're going to do. And we're sorry that you feel it's not that way, but things have changed. We're not going to have posters of, you know, people who are warmongers, who are eugenicists, who are slavers, or their names celebrated in the borough anymore. And that's the right thing to do. So the next story is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. This is actually a ridiculous situation that we're still here. And this is a story where a young girl, aged 12, has been banned from her school's canteen because she is wearing a Haringey cane roast style. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. She's been made to sit on the naughty table. I'm calling it a naughty table because she can't sit with her peers until or unless she complies with what they're calling, you know, remedies this breach of a uniform code. There has been a lot of progress in the UK with many activists, many parents and students pushing against this ridiculous notion of trying to police our hairstyle in schools. I think I raised the issue in my film Beauty Is, and that was I think it was probably around 10 years ago. And there's been some good wins, but I think was it called the Halo Project? There's been quite a few people trying to deal with this, but basically, as you can see from this story, the struggle still continues. Like I said, I'm going to move on from that. And this one is I don't even know how to start with this one. This is this woman called Justine Morrison. I don't know much about her, other than that she was working for some group. I can't remember, it was a music group, some inclusive group. I can't remember what they were doing. She was at a bar. She decided that she was going to be rowdy. Security said, "Look, please, you're kind of making a lot of noise. Please, can you kind of leave the premises? We're trying to get you to calm down. You're not calming down. Just very, ignorant about it all." And so, because she had to be escorted from the wine bar, she started using racial abuse. And thankfully, she was found guilty. She was filmed, I should say that. And this is the same thing with the police. She probably wouldn't have received a police caution if she hadn't been filmed, but she was filmed, and that the footage was shared on social media. So she has lost her job from this company that really is doing everything to disassociate itself from her. And the wine bar has said that she can never come back again. So she's been permanently banned from it. What I just want to share with you, which some people might find confusing, unless you know me and you know my view on racializing language, is that she didn't use the N-word. When she was abusing the doorman, she was, and this is to quote the newspaper, she was spitting the word black at him. Kept on saying things, that's why you get the name Black. She was making it clear, and she's actually accurate, even though we tend to try to reclaim these labels, whether it's, back in the day it was Negro, then it was colored, now it's black, whatever label, racializing language that we decide. I think it's people of color now. I mean, whatever label we decide to take on, these racists know exactly what they're doing. We're Africans. And so the caution was actually for her. And again, I use that phrase, for spitting out the word black and accosting him, saying that's why you get that name Black. And she's using it in the context of which it was originally designed for us, not by us. But, that's another, in fact, that's a lecture for another day. And let's go on and on and on. This is the story of oh God, I can't believe we left the Afro-Caribbean title in there. Apologies, we always remove this off, those titles off. So this is the sister who worked for BT who actually won a £20,000 award after she humiliated by her manager, who joked that she could be deported. Now she basically, she'd worked for BT Openreach for over 2 years. She was originally from the US, and she had a serious issue about, is her visa going to be renewed? It was causing her anxiety, and then her manager just started making jokes about how, well, you're going to get deported because there's not many African swimmers. Just little digs about her heritage. And she took him to a tribunal. She has Caribbean heritage, even though she moved to America from Haiti as a child, and she won. And this is good. This is a reminder that actually all these different layers of Afrophobia, of the way that racism approaches us, the little jibes and digs and what do the police call it, the banter, are unacceptable. They're just unacceptable. Not that we can't joke about each other, and we can't joke about features that we have which are innocuous. But when it comes to things that we cannot change, such as our ethnicity, such as the discrimination that we face because of our ethnicity, such as the fear that we feel because of being deported, having done nothing wrong, and then being in a position of power as a manager to make those jokes, knowing that there's not much, well, you believe there's not much we can do. I think it's good that the tribunal can say, no, that's wrong. And you can't humiliate her like that. It's been a bit quiet, I just realized. I'll keep going on. I hope you can still hear me. I just realized you are watching the Pan African Community News Network, 29th of January 2023, just running through the news. I should say you're welcome to go on our chat, Facebook or YouTube chat. I'm hoping Sister Oleander will join again, but I'm going to keep going on through the news. And so this story is a story of Sister Victoria Yafet. She passed away after a 2-hour wait for an ambulance. Now, she lived in Dagenham. She's been described as loving and cheerful. She's 40 years of age. Ambulance finally came, but her daughter said that she called the ambulance when she was concerned about her mother, who suffers from asthma. She was in crippling pain. But by the time the ambulance came, she had been on the floor for 6 hours, and so she died. Now, this, I'm not going to say this has anything to do with her ethnicity. I don't know that. I don't even think that from what I'm reading. But this is something what we'd call structural violence. And this structural violence is the term people use now are excess deaths. But structural violence is when people die, people receive harm by the actions or inactions or policies of the state. They're embedded, and they're so normalized that they become almost invisible, and we start to expect them. But it's only when I share stories like this and we tease them out, and you realize that actually it didn't have to go this way. It was avoidable. And structural violence is specifically about avoidable deaths. What you hear in the media called excess deaths. So our sister Victoria, she's living in Dagenham. I mean, I don't know. I thought I'd share the story. These things really anger me. This is not a story about structural violence per se. It's not cost anyone their physical life, and I'm talking about their ability to breathe, but it's taking off their actual life or their lifetime. So we have this story about a young dad who'd been kept in prison for almost 3 years, despite being cleared of grievous bodily harm by a court of law. And now there's a group that has sparked a campaign and a petition trying to get justice for him. His name is Yeshua Salman. Now, it's a complex issue. I say complex, it's not really that complex, actually. He is a former convicted armed robber. I don't think he carried out the crime. I think he was caught sitting in a car with a balaclava and a weapon, and he was arrested and he went to jail. But what happened is that there's this policy called IPP. It's called Imprisonment for Public Protection. And these sentences that are given out are designed to stop or to keep people who the states believe would be a menace to the public in jail, even though their jail term has been served. I hope you heard me right there. So an IPP sentence means that someone's been charged for a crime. In this case, he didn't do the robbery, but he was planning to do the robbery. They've been charged for a crime. They've served their time. So the justice has done its course. He's had time to reflect, kind of like make a change in his life. And what's happened is that this IPP system that came in place, which actually was scrapped a decade ago, let's be very clear about that as well, kept him in prison longer, 3 years after his jail time had been served. That's structural violence. That's not the same kind of structural violence, and maybe structural violence is the wrong term. Perhaps that would be more cultural violence, because cultural violence is anything that perpetuates or supports the idea of structural violence. So I know some people will say, well, he's a bad and he was up to badness, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? If he's rehabilitated, if he's done his time, if he's reflected on it, then there's no reason for him to still be in prison. And I know these are the sort of cases where people don't get a lot of sympathy for. But we have to be mindful of being quick to judge. What's that saying there? But for the grace of I. I just be mindful of that. Anyway, I thought I'd share that story with you as well. Giving you some good news. Perhaps I should have put this on the last section, actually. It's a bittersweet moment, but it's just a reflection for the young man, Jimmy Olubumiadewale, who has now received a plaque. I spoke about this in 2021. He jumped into the river to save the life of someone who'd fallen in, and he lost his own life in doing so. So it's good, I mean, this actually should have gone with the John LaRose story. I think the two of them would have worked together. When someone does something that's good and that's inspiring, there's nothing wrong with actually putting their name in the public realm. Now, if some rednecks have said, well, we can't pronounce Jimmy Olubumiadewale, so let's call him Black Boy Lane, that would have been an insult. In fact, some people are saying, why get rid of Black Boy Lane? It's the name of a pub. We want to keep the name of our pub. But sometimes it don't go like that. It's like David Olawale Bridge. Sometimes you have to just learn to understand that Britain is, a multi-ethnic nation. And there are people from many different backgrounds. And we're here. And we built it. And our blood and our sweat built it. And it owes us. And so it's good to have a plaque to this young man who lost his age at the, lost his life at the age of 20, trying to save someone else's life. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say on that. Now, the next section is a quick look at some of the UK health-related stories, and I don't think there's going to be many surprises when I tell you that the rate of stillbirths of African children is almost twice the rate of, that shouldn't say white babies, it should say European children. or European babies. And these are figures from the Office of National Statistics. My apologies, I haven't updated all the slides yet. Sometimes we take the headlines directly from the papers and then we edit them and correct them before I go live. It's been a stressful week, so I'm a little bit behind on all of this. But the stillbirth rate of African children, like I said, is almost twice that of European babies. And I mean, if you want this in numbers, the death rate of African babies before or during delivery continues to be the highest, with around 7 stillbirths to 1,000 births registered in 2021. And that, when I say 7 for African children, African babies, is compared to 3.6 for European babies. So we've spoken about the deaths of mothers, in maternity, during maternity, but we're also losing the babies as well. Structural violence, that's what that is. If we continue to talk about the NHS, then it's like I don't want to rag on the NHS because it is an amazing institution. It is one that I do hold with much respect and reverence, and I am a complete supporter of the strikes. I'll be taking part on strikes on Wednesday. I work at university and we're on strike, and I still support everyone from the rail, security, nurses, ambulance, border police, all of them. Right? They deserve pay increase that enables us to survive, the cost of living, and in the university case, we're also striking for our workloads. Our workloads are ridiculous, and we need that to change. But this particular story, I know that workload and pay and recruitment are issues that the NHS is striking for, but it doesn't change the fact that as an institution, that 1 in 3 members from African and other minority ethnic community groups in the NHS face discrimination or bullying. And this is being reported recently in a report by The Independent. It says that harassment of minority workers have not improved in the past 5 years, with almost 30% saying that they've been targeted in the past year alone, compared to 20% of European staff. So you've got to really understand that disparity, that gap is there, and it's growing. It's not going away. So despite 1/4 of the workforce, the NHS, we make up 1/4 of the workforce. We still only make up 10% of the most senior positions. So there's still a lot of work to do, and until we are in those senior positions in sufficient numbers and with sufficient integrity, because as we've learned from this government, the most diverse government in British history, that you can have the illusion of inclusion, where you have faces from African, Asian, and other minority ethnic people in those spots, but who do not help close these gaps and eradicate this discrimination and bullying. So I thought I'd share that because it's a new story. I am going to now close with our final section. Got a couple of stories for you, some good news stories. There were some there were some plays that were shared with us, and I just didn't have time to check them through. There was a play about Grenfell. One of the things I loved which used to do on this program was when we used to talk about programs that were being on TV, plays, cultural events, and we're just losing the space for the joy in life. I feel like we're just talking about, or I'm just talking about, the negativity, and I don't really want this platform to be one that is just purely negativity. So that's why we have the good news section, but we don't have the time and the capacity to also talk about some of the good works that are taking place. And there is a group on Twitter, I've forgotten what they call it, something like Black Theatre Lovers or something like that. I'll try and get their details, and I should share that, because there are plays, there are music events, there are reasoning sessions, there are venues where we come together and we heal and we learn and we smile and we joy. And I don't know how I can resolve that in here, because I have to report on the news. I've been very brief. I mentioned in the libation section about the story that's plaguing my head, which is about that death in America. I can't get it out of my head. I know it's going to haunt me all week. But let me share some good news, and then I'll ponder on this over the next couple of weeks. So the first story, if we think about what's been happening to African men across the world, this might seem like a really simple story, but it really warms my heart. And this is two young African males, Lindsay and Zayden, father and son. And what they're doing is just writing and performing poetry. And poetry just designed to help us through tough times. Now, they are dealing with issues like racism, they're dealing with issues like knife crime, they're dealing with issues in poverty and all these kind of issues. They're based in Nottingham, but with all the negativity that we hear about young African men, about fathers who are absent, fathers who are violent, we sometimes forget that there are so many brothers who are just doing the best they can at looking after their children, keeping the family going. They're not abusing their wives, their partnerships, they're loving, they're caring. And so for every negative that we hear, we need to hold on to this and remember that, Lindsay and Zayden, they're just writing poetry together. And they're not just writing it together, they're sharing it with their community and spreading joy. And that's enough. They don't need to go on a protest with a banner and a t-shirt and chant burn down Babylon. Leave that to me. Write poetry of love and of joy, of how to survive this nightmare. The system, I was about to swear and I shouldn't do that. Just do that. And we see you and we feel you. And like I said, I wish I could dedicate a program to just pure joy. But that's not the world we live in right now. But just know, and I say know and understand, that there are others out there that are doing just that. And this other story on the same ilk is that of our brother Anthony Joseph. And for just doing what I just mentioned a second ago, he won a £25,000 poetry prize. £25,000. There was a record 201 submissions, but he decided that, I'm going to still enter. And he wrote a poem about how his life was changed and the impact of growing up with a father who was largely absent. And and this whole idea that, we sometimes are dealt rough cards, but I don't have to continue that forward. And a lot of us do not continue that forward. So I just want to, big him up. What was it called? The T.S. Eliot Prize for luminous poetry. I'm not sure if it's the same brother who wrote the sci-fi. I don't know if he made a sci-fi book a long time ago. I'm going to search for it. His name rings a bell. But this is good news. And I just, all I'm trying to say, I'm not saying that money is everything, but I just want to share that message that art, love, and joy has value. And even if it doesn't come with a £25,000 prize like this one did, we see you and we hear you, and we engage and we want you to keep engaging in those practices. And I'm talking specifically for brothers right now. My love for sisters is eternal and infinite. I don't need to focus on that for this particular issue, other than saying that I can't imagine the pain of knowing that your boy was beaten by Africans and he called out your name in his dying breath and you couldn't hear him to be there for him. And I know how I felt about hearing that story at the top. Thinking about my sons out on the street and thinking they're not safe, and we have to make them safe. We have to provide mechanisms where people know if you touch one of us, our independent group is gonna find you and hunt you down. We ain't waiting for no IOPC report. I said I'm not going to talk about that. So let me close for the last story for this week. And very interesting. I went there. I'm trying my best not to focus on that story. This is an award, and ironically, it's an award you can see given out by police officers. But in this case, doing the right thing, because these two young girls, these two young sisters, young women, I think one's 20 and one is 11. They did an amazing act. It was very simple. They just didn't turn the other way when badness was happening. They saw a 13-year-old girl who was about to be, well, not about to be, who was being abducted on her way to school. They saw a brother, it was a brother, Cadian Nelson, dragged her into an alleyway in Mitcham. And Zian, which is the name of the girl, Zian and Ashante, they called their mother and contacted the police immediately. And as he was putting his hand off of the young 13-year-old girl, who was about to engage in an act of child rape, and thankfully, they stopped that. Ashanti, the youngest, followed him, filming him on her mobile phone, so made it clear that he ain't gonna get away from this. Now, of course, that could have gone bad. That could have gone really bad. An 11-year-old following a child rapist with a mobile phone, while her sister is actually calling her mum, calling the police, and just trying to stop it from happening. That's what they did. They deserved that reward, and I thank you, and I thank you, and I thank you, and I thank you for protecting our baby, our daughter. You queens are amazing, and it shouldn't be the police giving you an award. We need an institution. It makes me want to bring back Legali just so I can actually issue an award from Legali. We need to bring back institutions that are our institutions that bring awards. Is that Sister Oleander? I think I can see you there. Did you want to say something? You're muted, Miss Lai. We can't.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, no, I'm afraid.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Apologies, everybody. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I mean, there were so many things I wanted to say before, but unfortunately, I had some issues which I couldn't resolve. But there's some messages which I wanted to read out. Should I do that now, or do you want to just finish?
This is the last story. So
Yeah.
I was just out there talking to the effort.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So there, Angela sends greetings, evening, and Dee says greetings and thank you. Learn to Dig 2 says peace, and also the medical field. This is a story back, what you was talking about before.
Okay.
Yeah, previous story. And some Camilo Isla, sorry, says good work, brother.
Oh, give thanks. I appreciate that. It means a lot for us to know you appreciate what we're doing.
Yeah. And D says V. I'm not sure.
Would you say that D says V? Oh, I think I've lost Sister Oleander. I can't. It looks like we're having some technical issues today. Well, hopefully you've been able to hear the program. Yeah, it's the way the system works sometimes. But let me move to the last slide. And as ever, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being with us. It's good to know that you've been sending messages and you've been on this journey with us. I want to thank you, Brother Colin, again, eternally, for sharing the research. I had no capacity this week to do the research, and the sterling work, you and others who help us, Sister Leona, you put this together. I couldn't do it without you, and all of you out there, our Galley supporters and community, that keep my spirit alive and fighting. And when I am exhausted and dropping the ball, to know that there are good people there who are carrying on the works. I'm humbled and I'm blessed to have you all in my life. So I want to give thanks, Sister Oleander. I know having some technical issues, but I know she extended her thanks to you all as well. Just remind you that we'll be back on the 12th of February with another 2 weeks of news. And I'm going to close, as I always do, with a reminder: walk safe, be loving. Don't take your eye off white supremacy. It has deputies that look like us. They walk, they talk, they smell, they grin, they look like us, but they're not us. They're deputies of white supremacy, and they murder us and they betray us. Thankfully, they're the minority. We have enough of us that are engaged in joy making and protecting and loving and healing, and keep focused on the positives, but just be wary and understand, not overstand, that them beast amongst us, them beast exist. May the ancestors continue to guide